One. Good afternoon, and welcome back to What Matters Gulf Coast. It is a beautiful day outside. Of course, we've got some heat, but we also have some nice breeze right along with it, so it doesn't make it too hot. But we thank you for joining us again. This week and for the next 2 weeks, we have some very, very special guests. We will have people coming all the way from Montgomery, Alabama for the next 3 weeks, this week and the next 2 weeks. We will hear presentations from the staff members of the Alabama Arise organization out of Montgomery, Alabama. You ask me, what is Alabama Arise? Alabama Arise is a statewide member-led organization advancing public policies to improve the lives of Alabamians who are marginalized by poverty. The membership includes faith-based, community, nonprofits, civil groups, grassroots leaders, and individuals from across Alabama. Alabama Rise is also a 501c3 nonprofit organization, which means donations are tax deductible. And we will also have the website on our page. So if after you hear the presentation and you want to contribute to this organization, please feel free. Now, Alabama Rise uses 3 kinds of activities to promote fairer public policies towards all Alabamians. They use public analysis. The Arise Public Policy team studies current state policies and legislative proposals and analyzes their impact on people living in or near poverty. They also use statewide organizing. Arise organizes members and people with low income to speak out on the development of public policies that affect their lives. And a third way that Alabama Arise uses is citizens advocacy. Arise works to equip its members for active participation in the democratic process, including legislative advocacy. Now, our first presenter for this week is Miss Carol Gundlach, and she's going to speak with us about the impact of untaxing groceries, what type of an impact it would have on our communities, what are some of the objections to this policy, and just where are we in the legislature with this particular issue. But before we begin, let me tell you some of the work that Carol has been a part of and her expertise in these areas. Carol Gundlach has been an Arise Policy Analyst since 2013. She focuses on issues related to taxes and budgets. Carol previously worked as executive director of the Alabama Coalition Against Domestic Violence and as the state coordinator for the Alabama Coalition Against Hunger. She has a master's degree in social work and has taught social work policy and community organization at Auburn University and the University of Alabama. She is the Senior Policy Analyst for Alabama Arise, and you can contact her at Carol at alarise.org. And of course, we have all of that on our page. So the next person you will hear from is Miss Carol Gundlach. Carol?
Thank you, V. And thank you all for watching today on this really lovely Sunday afternoon. We all know that the price of groceries has been going through the roof. And we all know how hard it is to stretch those grocery dollars and to make ends meet, particularly in the current climate. What we probably don't realize, unless we have lived in a different state at some point recently, is that Alabama, in addition to suffering the same high grocery prices that other states are suffering, adds an additional burden on people's ability to feed their families. And that is that Alabama, unlike nearly every other state in the nation, taxes groceries exactly like we tax any other purchase that we make. So depending on where you are living in Alabama, you may be paying anywhere from an additional 9 to 11% whenever you buy groceries. And if you're paying what is kind of the state average of about 10% in taxes whenever you buy groceries, that's the equivalent of about 2 weeks of additional groceries that you could buy if Alabama did not tax groceries. We actually are one of only 3 states in the nation that continues to fully impose a sales tax on groceries. We are very much outside the norm for even most of our neighboring states. It is, I believe, us, Mississippi, and South Dakota that continues to fully tax groceries. So we're very much an outlier. And of that tax on groceries, and this is an important thing to remember, 4% of that tax is state sales tax. That is, it goes straight to the state of Alabama and actually goes to the education budget. It's earmarked, as they say in budget terms, for education, for our schools. And then another 6% of that is taxes that are imposed by units of local government, your cities, your counties, and so on. So for as long as I can remember, Alabama Arise has really been focused on trying to get at least the state portion of that sales tax taken off of groceries. And that would basically save people in Alabama about 4% of their grocery costs. So another week or so of groceries. And we have been working real hard at getting a bill through the Alabama legislature for years now to try to take the sales tax off of groceries. So I think most of you who are kind of listening to this are going, well, that sounds like a no-brainer to me. Why can't we take the sales tax off groceries? Why will the legislature not do this? And I think it's really important before you get mad at your local legislator, because I know many of your legislators, and most of them are very nice people, that it is not hard to take the tax off groceries. If we simply had to have a legislative vote to do that, it would probably pass the legislature pretty easily. The problem is, what do we do to replace the revenue that is lost? And remember, the money goes straight to our local schools. It goes straight to education. And if we simply took the sales tax off of groceries without doing anything else, we would leave about a $4 to $5 million hole in Alabama's education budget. Now, we all know how hard our schools are struggling, and we all know the challenges that COVID has imposed both on the schools and our students. And we at Arise think that it's simply not acceptable to take the tax off of groceries and not replace it by some other funding stream so that we can hold our schools harmless and maybe even get a little additional revenue for them. And that's where the rub is. It is not taking the tax off, the state tax off of groceries. It is replacing the state sales tax that is on groceries with another revenue stream that will make sure that our schools do not lose money as we give families a break. Now, Alabama Rise has one proposal we really like to replace that lost revenue. And we've heard some other proposals that we may not be as enamored of, but that we would certainly be willing to consider. The proposal that we would like to see the legislature do is to eliminate a tax deduction as opposed to a tax. It's called the federal income tax deduction. What that is when we are also an unusual state, a very unusual state, and that we are only a handful of states that allows people, when they calculate their state income tax, to deduct their federal income taxes that they paid before they finalize the calculation of their state income tax. So basically, people in Alabama get a tax break for their federal income taxes, and the more federal income taxes they pay, the bigger a tax break they get. Well, ask yourself, who pays the most federal income taxes? It is the wealthy. It is really and truly the very top 1% of Alabamians who get the benefit of the federal income tax deduction, because they are the people who pay the most federal income taxes in the state. And so we're proposing eliminating the grocery tax, which disproportionately will help not even the poorest of the poor. It will help middle income, lower middle income, working families who pay out of cash for their local groceries. And then imposing eliminating the tax deduction for federal income taxes that disproportionately affects the richest people in the state. If we did those two things, everybody in Alabama, except for the top 5% of Alabamians in terms of income, would get a net tax break. And the poorer you are, the more tax break you would get if we did those two things. So it would only be for the top 4% that there'd be a little bit of an increase in the taxes they'd pay, and the top 1% would pay more taxes to the state of Alabama. We think that's fair. And we could direct you to our tax and budget handbook, which you can get a free copy of if you go to our Alabama Rises website. Just Google Alabama Rise and you'll get to us. And we'll send you a free copy of our tax and budget handbook, which explains why we think it is fair for those who have the most to be able to give back the most. So that has been the proposal we have had at the legislature for, as I said, many years now. It has not passed. We came very close about 8 years ago and lost it in the Senate by one vote. This last year in the legislative session, we had a couple of really good bipartisan bills. Senator Andrew Jones, who is a Republican from up in DeKalb County, he had a proposal to do exactly what I've said, take the taxes, the state portion taxes off of groceries, and to replace it not by eliminating the federal tax deduction, but by capping it so that most middle income people could still avail themselves of the deduction, but the rich would pay more in taxes. There were a couple of accompanying bills in the House of Representatives, some from Democrats, some from Republicans. Unfortunately, as we know, this session was really tied up in all kinds of controversies and complexities, and a need to end early so legislators could get out and campaign for re-election. So the bills didn't pass. We are really hoping that next year that Senator Jones and that the other sponsors in the House will bring their bills back and we can try this. The other proposal that we have heard recently that we are thinking about the possibility of is to give people a rebate on their state income taxes if their incomes fall below a certain level. And when they get their income taxes, when they get their refunds. We think that's better than nothing. We don't think it's as good as putting money back into people's pockets right away. The other question that we hear sometimes is why just the state portion? Why take away the whole 10% tax? And this gets into a very complicated issue called home rule. That basically, way back in 1901, the Alabama legislature took away the power of local government to pass taxes other than sales taxes. So if your local government wants to impose, an income tax or a property tax increase or some other kind of tax, they have to ask the legislature's permission to do that. And that's very complicated and very difficult, usually requires a constitutional amendment. The one thing local governments can do is they can pass a sales tax. And so I live in rural Macon County, Alabama. And if we didn't have a sales tax, we would just shut down county government because there is no money for the government to function. That's probably true in most of the counties in the state.
Yes.
And so we don't want to bankrupt our counties. We don't want to bankrupt our schools, but we want to be able to give families a break on their groceries. And that's why we think our proposal is the best. And we are just hoping the legislature will see their way to getting around to passing it. So that's where we are. Follow us at alarise.org. We have lots of information on lots of issues we work on, and tax reform is one of them.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Do you have a couple of questions? Do you have any idea of whether or not this issue will come up in the new legislative session?
We are sure it will. There has not been a legislative session for, I'd say, the last 15 years that this has not come up. So it will definitely come up. The real question, is it going to come up in a bipartisan manner? Because that's what it takes to get a bill passed at the Alabama legislature. We have to have, and we want support from both sides of the aisle.
Exactly.
So we're going to continue working with legislators to do that.
Okay. What about, you were talking about replacing and proposals that would help offset the cost of untaxing the groceries. Where would the lottery fit in all of this if we had or could get a lottery?
Well, that's a really good question. Alabama Rise does not have a position on the lottery per se or on gambling, which is really where the money is per se.
Yes.
But what we do think is that if we are going to go there, if we're going to impose a lottery, if we're going to vote for gambling, it needs to be done in a way that, number one, maximizes the revenue to the state, and number two, does not hurt the poorest of the poor.
Yes.
And so, in terms of what would happen with grocery tax, I think it depends on what the legislature decides to do with the revenue that would come from a lottery or from pari-mutuel betting. We have seen proposals that have been all over the place on where that money would go.
Mm-hmm.
If it went to K-12 schools, that might be an alternative to the grocery tax. The proposals we have seen most of the time have been to direct it to college scholarships, which is, we certainly need that, and that's a good and noble thing. But that wouldn't help the K-12 schools that would lose the money from the grocery tax. So it depends on what they decide to do with that revenue.
Oh, okay. Okay. So all of that is still up in the air.
It is so up in the air. Yes.
Did we even have a lottery bill that tried to get passed this legislative session?
At the very end of the session, Senator Albritton introduced a couple of bills. One was a freestanding lottery bill. One was a pari-mutuel betting bill that would allow for casino-type gambling. They adjourned before they ever took those bills up. I kind of think they might have gotten out of committee, but I wouldn't swear to that.
Okay.
But it certainly wasn't like a couple of years ago where they came up on the floor and were extensively debated.
Okay. All right. One of the things that I participated in was when our Mobile County delegation came back home, they had legislative meetings all across Mobile County. And I attended probably, I think we only have 8 or 9 legislators, and I attended maybe 4 or 5 of those meetings. And every last one of those senators and or legislators all said that they were in support of untaxing the groceries as well as expanding Medicaid.
Good for them.
They actually said that, and they said it to a packed house. All of them had theirs at different restaurants, and the restaurants would be packed with people. So that's a good indication there.
And as I said, the issue has never been untaxing groceries. They like to give tax cuts, and they particularly like to give tax cuts in election years, which is one of the reasons we thought that might pass this year.
Yes.
It is, again, the replacement revenue, because what it really will be imposing a tax increase on somebody.
Mm-hmm.
On Medicaid expansion, one of the things we have been looking at is whether or not, if gambling bills do pass, whether or not the legislature will earmark some of that money for health care, which could include Medicaid expansion.
Yes, very good. Okay, let me ask you about the home rule. You talked about that in terms of most bills have to have like the legislators to approve, even though it's for this particular county. That's why we see all these amendments on the ballot, and it's for all these counties that we have no clue about. Why do you think that? I know it was a long time ago, but why do you think that was in place at that time?
Oh, I think it is really clear that the legislature that was in power in 1901, and we have to go back a little bit in history and remember that 1901 was very shortly after the Reconstruction period.
Yes.
And that legislators really wanted to cement power in the legislature. And, this was a white dominated legislature in 1901, like it had been, 10, 20 years before.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to cement power in Montgomery to prevent counties like the one I live in from um, being able to take care of their own business in a way that they have seen fit to take care of their own local business.
Exactly.
And so they restricted the ability of counties and cities to do almost anything on their own. I'd say I've been monitoring the Alabama legislature and lobbying the legislature for close to 30 years now. And I'd say that the vast majority of bills that are introduced at the legislature are things that are called local bills.
Yes.
And a local bill is a bill that only affects one area of the state, usually
Yes.
one county, one city.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives them permission to do stuff that you're just shaking your head. Why is the legislature worried about entertainment districts?
Exactly.
There are legislative votes on whether or not a particular city can have an entertainment district. Every session of the legislature, police jurisdictions, the
Mm-hmm.
legislature has to vote on whether or not a city can expand their police jurisdiction or shrink their police jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and a lot of those restrictions have to do with taxes.
Yeah.
The legislature just recently restricted the ability of cities to impose a employment tax on people who lived outside of the county or the city and worked within the county or city. They recently said, nope, you can't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They restrict the ability of counties and cities to do anything about property taxes without legislative approval. And much of this approval is in the Constitution, which, as you said, we all know when we go to vote, there's not only the candidates on the ballot, but there's
Yes.
a list a mile long of things that
Mm-hmm.
nobody can read.
Exactly.
It's all legal gobbledygook.
Mm-hmm.
And most of those are totally local bills. So you all down there in Mobile are
Mm-hmm.
voting on whether or not Gadsden, Alabama can change their police jurisdiction.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's crazy. We have the longest constitution in the United States because
Mm.
all of these bills, all of this stuff is in our Constitution. And it deprives localities of responding to the needs of their own citizens.
Yes.
It's something that needs to be changed. You know, again, and I can tell you know a lot about this, that
Mm-hmm.
constitutional reform has been an important issue in the state, and
Yes.
we have not made much progress in that area.
No, we have not. And that's an issue that's been ongoing also.
Yes.
One last question. You mentioned about one of the proposal that Alabama Rise is in favor of would actually impact the top 5%, anywhere from the 5% to the 1%. Is that group of people actually paying a fair amount of taxes as far as the state is concerned?
No, I think they are not.
Mhm.
And the part of the issue, and this is a broader issue of tax reform in Alabama,
Yes.
that Alabama essentially has a totally flat income tax structure. Just about everybody caps out, everybody except the very, 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 very poorest in the state, cap out at about 6% of income.
Mhm.
Many states, I won't say most, but many states and the federal government have what's called a progressive tax structure, where the more you earn, the more you pay in taxes. Now, there are all kinds of problems with our federal tax code, including that we don't tax non-earnings as well as we should. But we do have a progressive tax code as it relates to earnings, as do many states. Alabama doesn't. Our federal taxes are just about flat.
Mhm.
Our property taxes are actually very low, and there are good things and bad things to be said about that. The good thing is it allows for a high rate of home ownership, a much higher rate of home ownership than many other states have. Um, the bad thing is we are giving gigantic tax breaks to huge multi out of state corporations,
Yes.
very often out of nation corporations
Yes.
that own giant swaths of Alabama.
Mhm.
Um, so we could do some things to our property tax code that would improve it, certainly. And we can make our income tax structure a little more progressive. We could kind of do what Senator Arthur Orr did this session, but do more of it, where he gave a small income tax break to lower tax earners or lower earners by increasing the individual deduction and the child tax credit. We liked that bill. We supported it. We'd like to see it go much further and give a bigger deduction and bigger credit. But it was a step in the right direction.
Yes.
The part of our taxes that is unfair is the income, I'm sorry, is the sales tax. We tax, groceries at 10%, but we tax everything else at 10% too. And so that means when your kids need a new pair of sneakers for school, or they need school supplies, or they need,
Mhm.
anything, you have to pay 10% extra to purchase that.
Yes.
Meanwhile, the services that people who have money spend a disproportionate amount of their money on are not taxed. So, if you hire a lawyer, if you hire a CPA to do your taxes, if you go to an expensive beauty shop to get your hair done, you don't pay taxes on any of those services. And so all of that disproportionately means that the poorer people in the state, the lower income people, the working people of the state, they're paying more of their money in taxes because we tax goods and not services here.
Okay.
So that's what makes our tax code essentially terribly unfair and regressive in Alabama, is that the sales taxes, all of them, and particularly the grocery tax, falls hardest on the people with less money than are the wealthy.
Now, when you take a look, I know I said this was the last one, but
No,
one more
that's
thing.
fine.
One more thing. When you take a look at the other states, do the other states also tax the services as well as the goods too? They tax both groups, right?
That's a really good question. Some states do, some states don't. It is really a mixed bag. But increasingly, state lawmakers in, slightly more progressive states are looking at services, because that is really what people are spending their money on.
Yes.
There has been a lot of kind of conversation on the news lately about the facts that tax revenues nationwide are going down in comparison to where they were a year ago,
Exactly.
right after we came out of COVID. And that was because people were frantically spending money on things when they were locked down. Now that things have relaxed, and I don't want to say we're out of COVID because we are not,
No.
but as things have gotten a little better and people are out and about, they're spending more money on services. That's lowering taxes all over the country.
Yes.
We don't tax services. So
Mhm.
I think a lot of state lawmakers are looking at that. Alabama is not yet.
Mm.
And of course, the other thing that is making a difference is how we tax internet purchases. Now, Alabama is taxing internet purchases. It has actually saved our general fund budget for the last 2 or 3 years, that those internet taxes have been going up. But there is a lot more we could do, and we don't tax internet sales the same way we tax sales in a local store. And that's another fairly serious problem, is the more people buy online, the less they pay in taxes that go, again, to our local schools and
Yeah.
our local services.
Yes. Yes. Okay. All right. Well, we certainly have enjoyed you, Carol, and you have brought a wealth of information, not only on your topic area, but on all these other areas we kind of delved off into. So we do appreciate you taking this time. And then next week, we're going to have, I think it's Medicaid expansion.
Great.
And he will come and talk with us about that. Carol,
That would be great. Enjoy it.
yes, yes. And everything I've seen, because I've gotten a lot of information from your organization, a lot of the statistics and the percentages and what have you, everything I've seen does not speak the same language that a lot of times you hear from your legislators. So I'm eager to get to that topic as well.
Well, good. Help us educate them.
Yes, yes, trying our best, trying our best. But anyway, thanks again, Carol. And we may get back in touch with you a little later in the year for maybe a repeat performance.
I'd be glad to. You all have a
Okay.
wonderful day.
All right. Thank you. We are going to switch gears a little bit. That was a wonderful presentation. She talked about a lot of things, her topics, and then other topics as well. Very, very knowledgeable person, very knowledgeable. I want to take just a few minutes, maybe the next 10 minutes, 12 minutes, and talk with you about the importance of getting out there and voting. Now, I know you are probably hearing a lot on the media about the November 8th date, but we have a primary on on May 24th. It'll be coming up soon. And we need people to vote in the primary. This is when we weed out some of the candidates that are running and we decide on the top one or two. And then, of course, they would run against the opposing party. So I want people to concentrate. Now, if you go on our last week's website, pull that one up, you can actually see a sample ballot for the Democrats as well as the Republicans. We can't tell you how to vote. All we can do is encourage you to go and vote. And young people, we need you. We need you to come out and vote. This election helps to determine on your city level, on your state level, and it's all and on the national level, because we will also have some positions for senators that are also running. But it is very important that we take a look and we do what they call down voting, where you vote on that city level in that primary, or you vote on that state level in that primary, because those people are the people who can impact your life quicker, faster, and a lot easier than someone on the national level. Not to say that the national elections, the election for the president and what have you, are not important. They are important. But the elections for the city, your mayor, your city council members, all of that, your judges and what have you, and then on the state level, those are equally as important. If you take a look at the way the country is going now, you will see how many states have been taken over, how many Secretary of States are a part of the Republican Party, and the House and the Senate are all Republicans. And they are doing things the way they want to do them, not necessarily the way the majority of the citizens want it done, but the way they want to have it done. So it's equally important. As I said before, if you look on our page now, she has put up the elections. We've got local elections, and we've got state elections, and we have national elections. And we also have several amendments. We've got several ballots that are on, will be on the elections on the 24th. And we'll delve into those more next week. So we'll kind of give you kind of almost a cheat sheet on the amendments that will, because it's 4 or 5 of them, but they're very long. So we'll talk about those more next Sunday. Okay. We have enjoyed you spending this time with us today. We had an excellent presenter today, and we will have a very excellent one next Sunday. He's going to talk about Medicaid expansion, which is something that we have been looking forward to. Actually, there has been monies that have been set aside to expand Medicaid. And for some reason, well, I know the reason, and you probably do too, our state decided not to go with it. When we had the other governor, Love, when we had him, he was too busy chasing to take care of business. And then the governor we currently have, she doesn't want it. So let's listen to our next week's presenter, what he has to say about expanding Medicaid. I want to thank you again for participating with us. And I want to tell you and remind you, May 24th, go and vote, please. And go online and check to make sure you are registered to vote. There is still time to get the absentee ballots. The deadline for requesting an absentee ballot is May 19th. So you still have time if you're going to be out of town, out of state, or whatever, you can easily do an absentee ballot, okay? Please join us again next Sunday, 3 o'clock, same place, same time, and same location. Good evening.